Yeah.
It's interesting. Because we have 4 more minutes. I took a tour of the Midway ship in San Diego,
Yeah.
and it served from 1942 to 202 for 60 years. And anyways, in the area where they show the planes, they have like a translucent piece of plastic with these chips. And I said, well, how come it's not tracked by computer? And they said, well, what happens if the computers go down? We still have to track everything manually for the
Yeah.
planes on the ship. They still to this day
Yeah.
track. Yeah.
Eric, just for
Yeah.
you to know, the recording is on as expected. It started automatically, okay? So be
Okay.
aware
You bet.
we are recording now.
But we've got 3 minutes, and I think we should wait, for the attendees to sign up. Coming in at 4 and at 6. So
Yes. Yes, definitely. Armando, did you hear me say thank you so much? I think we lost you briefly.
No, I did, and I said it's my pleasure. I enjoy this. I have a lot of fun doing this.
Yeah, we're happy that you do. We're very grateful that you do. Thank you. Thank you.
Remember, IT is my degree, so I mean that's what I really like it, right?
IT is not my degree, but I haven't, I'm British. We have this, we're going to make it work spirit. So I will make
Anyway,
it. Yeah.
we're gonna make it work one way or the other. Trust me, because
all right. Well, T minus 2 minutes and counting.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean we.
Yeah. No.
Oh, froze a little bit. I think we're going to lose a little bandwidth as we get more participants, but hopefully not. So I see Rita, Dawn, Laura Ann, Margaret, Karen, Mary, Stephanie, and Mohammed.
These are good people.
Yep.
Hang on. Let me see if I can turn the phone off so it doesn't ring.
Good idea. All right, everybody will begin in just about 30 seconds. We do want to be fair to all the people that are still coming in.
We got about half a minute, and
Yep.
then we're gonna get started. We got 12 people, including you two. So it's top of the hour. Welcome to the content analysis webinar. Because we have two presenters, we are not going to use the podium facility this time, but we have different ways that we can have a lot of fun too. And those are ideas that, Elizabeth and Eric will let you know in a minute. The way we would like to do the questioning is that we either raise hands, and when you raise your hand, the system keep track of who raised it first, and I'm going to bring you into the podium one by one if you want to talk. If you don't want to talk, just ask a question. I will also keep track of who asked the question first, and then I'm going to publish the question for the whole audience to see it, and we're going to have an open discussion. With that said, Eric and Elizabeth decided that because the limitation of not having the podium, Eric is going to share his screen. I'm gonna play with the side twice, and you tell me which size is better for you. And with that said, Eric and Elizabeth, it's all yours. Let me know about the size of the presentation. Is this better?
Yeah,
I can't
probably.
see it on my screen.
Can you see it when it's smaller, Eric?
Oh, no, I can. As long as I can see the presentation, I'm good. I just want to make sure.
Okay,
I can
this is the other option. Which one is better? This or this?
I think this is better, but could we get a comment from the audience? Just send us a message on the IM or send a question. Armando will see it. And without a response, I'd say we go with this one.
With it. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Because time is short, we'll get started. Welcome to the Content Analysis Shindig webinar. I'm Eric Bean with your host, Lynn Johnston, and we're very much looking forward to talking about all things content analysis. So this evening, we're going to do an overview. We're going to allow you to do some introductions with your peers, and then Liz and I will do a little bit of a formal introduction. We're going to talk about the reliability and the rigor of content analysis, its applications. We're going to talk a little bit about content analysis design and how it's separated from quantitative to qualitative, and show you some real published examples. Looking forward to doing that this evening, as well as giving you a variety of different resources and then fielding your questions. We're going to be talking this evening about the chain of logic that's often used when we develop a content analysis study. And along those lines, we think of prominence. What do we want to measure? What are we looking at? We think of the context. What do we want to measure? What are we looking at? The figures, the ground, manifest, latent, and we'll be discussing, what those topics mean, because the landscape is changing when it comes to the methodology, and there's some blurriness and fine lines between quantitative and qualitative. But the overview is that most quantitative or content analysis studies are used for comparing. They're used for benchmarking in the media and the humanities fields. Often confused as just qualitative research method, content analysis also quantitatively looks at instances of words, images, the size, the published pieces, for example. They're counted, they're compared to one another. You'll often hear about size and frequency. We're going to be discussing prominence in more detail this evening, how likely they would be seen by the target audience or in a speech. That's things that are said first rather than perhaps later. And then myself and Liz are happy to assist, any of those this evening in thinking about their possible coding book of definitions, because among all of the other research methods, content analysis involves a lot of pre-thinking, operationalizing, and definitions and terms, based on if you're counting things, what are you counting? Does everybody agree on that definition? And so forth. And then, of course, from a qualitative standpoint as well. So for the next 3 to 5 minutes, we'd like you to briefly introduce yourself via your icon. And if you participated in Shindig before, all you have to do is take your square or your mouse and connect to another square of any individual. You can do up to 2 or 3 people and mingle to learn about your colleagues over the next 3 to 5 minutes. Test the system out. Share your relationship to University of Phoenix. Share how you believe content analysis can be used, anything that you're thinking about doing right now, or maybe a study in the future. And then feel free to share your prospective study in the chat area as well. Just post some information about the kind of content analysis study you're thinking about. And then we'll let you have your time together. So I'll actually stop talking because us academics, we love to hear ourselves talk, and give you guys a few minutes to share with each other, and then we'll join back in. Sound good?
Yes, Armando, can you change the view so that we see the audience again? Make the presentation smaller. We might have lost him.
Did we?
Yeah, I think we did.
Okay. Because I could remove it, not share my screen anymore.
What did you say?
But
What did you say? What did you say, Eric? What did you want?
oh, could you make the visual a little smaller so we can see the people mingling?
Okay, good.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yes, I can see that they need help mingling. So if I hit this arrow here,
Is
that'll
that
put me.
better?
Nope. Go back to where you were. Okay. Can I jump down into the audience? Just pull my icon down.
Hello?
Back to where you were. Back to where you were, Armando. So that we can see the audience. Armando, can you get us so that we can see the audience?
Well, even if we can't see for right now, hopefully you figured out how to mingle with your peers just by attaching your square or clicking on another square. And we can't hear you during that discussion. That's private between you and the person you're mingling with. So,
Now
but
you
we
want to.
wanted you to have some time.
What we'd like you to try is the square term might be a little confusing. Take your icon and move it
I think
across
we
the.
lost Elizabeth. She's connecting.
Oh, I can hear her. I can hear her.
Can you see
Hear
her?
me?
Yes.
I can hear you well.
Can you hear me, Armando? No.
I can hear you. Hopefully
Good.
Okay.
everybody else can.
Armando, can you
It's
make.
just Elizabeth. I think we lost Elizabeth, but she's just trying to connect.
Yeah, but I can hear her still. So it could be just your area.
Okay, I can see a group of 4 now. I can see Jim.
Good.
I can see Karen, Margaret,
Okay.
Perfect.
and Dr. Borley, I believe. They're mingling together now. I see that group.
Good.
Oh, good.
Is the only group I can see now. Actually, it grew to 5 now. They are five people talking together. Dr. Lane.
Anybody
Yeah,
posting in the chat area what they're working on?
nothing on the chart. Remember, you can ask questions. Click the question mark, or just click the chat. Either one is going to work. If you click the question mark, I can publish the question so everybody can see it, not as a question, but as something you discuss.
And
I would
again,
say.
everybody, the reason. Oh, go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
Liz.
I would say
No, so
one
the
more.
reason why. Yeah, one more minute. We're doing this because we want to get everybody a chance, to get involved, and because we don't have time for, pure individual introductions. So yeah, I'd say about another minute or so. It's always
And we
good to
just
network.
encourage you to try it. Just bump into somebody and say hi.
Anyway, we're
Yep.
going to get better at this with time and practice. We're going to get
Yep.
better, right? And I'm glad
That's it. We seem to have a pretty good connection, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
I did to do.
Are you going to call everybody back, Eric? Or is it time to
Yeah.
go?
Yeah. Well, yeah, about another minute or so. Are they all still still stuck together? Are they all? Because I can't see.
Armando, are they all still stuck together? We've lost him.
Lost him. Okay.
Don Driscoll, Erin Creator. That's another group.
Yeah.
Oh, good, good, good.
Okay. So okay. So that's good. That's good. Yeah, and then so what we'll do in about another minute, we'll begin, and then Liz is going to share a little bit of her expertise and background, how she got into content analysis, and then I'll share mine as well. So stand by.
Okay, I can see the audience, and this is great. People are talking.
Oh, good, good, good.
Yeah, but I think they're probably ready to come back when you're ready,
Oh,
Eric.
yeah. All right, we'll move on, and everybody, we're gonna do the formal presentation again, and we're gonna start with Liz. Liz is gonna give a little background information on how she got started in content analysis.
Okay,
Liz, if you can see this.
I can see it, and I can hear myself, so that's good. So
Good.
I learned content analysis and application. I really was very attracted to the very positive qualities of content analysis. It's very flexible. There's an enormous amount of data available in public that can be used for analysis. Any traces of human communication can be part of analysis.
Eric, I
It
cannot hear
stands
Elizabeth. Can you hear
Yes,
I
Elizabeth?
can. Yep, I can
Okay.
hear her.
and I can hear you too, Armando.
Yep.
So good. Um, it stands alone and it works with other approaches, such as a case study. So today, we're going to share some background, as Eric has mentioned. Towards the end of our formal presentation, we're going to share some of our thinking about some of the issues within content analysis. We're just thinking ourselves, and we would like to take advantage of the fact that we have an audience here or a participating group here of highly educated people who have an interest in research. So we're hoping you can share some of your thinking with us as we share some of our thinking with you. Okay, so that's my
Yep.
introduction. Thank you, Eric.
You bet. And there'll be plenty of time after as well, too. And when I stop sharing, we'll open up the podium, my podium, for anybody that wants to come up as well. All right. So
Okay.
good. Yep. So I began content analysis uh, really in the mid 1990s at Michigan State University under the tutelage of Stephen Lacey. He was a quantitative journalist, and that was the requirement for me to be in the master's program. The first course that I had to take was quantitative journalism, which kind of shocked me because I had gone into journalism for my fascination of words, not numbers. But I learned quite a bit, and I learned, what that meant. And it's not only looking at journalism from an economic standpoint, but also in terms of content analysis when we do research on journalistic endeavors. And with social media being so prominent today, television, radio, newspapers, magazines, the internet, and even all that technology that was just beginning, over 20 years ago, all of that is subject for any type of content analysis study. But much of the success relies on operationalizing key terms and developing a rigorous coding book of definitions. So, in other words, if you're going to do a quantitative content analysis on the amount of environmental stories that you might find in your daily newspaper, you have to define what is an environmental story. And are we going to be looking at some key word in the headline? Are we going to be looking at some key word that's inside of the body of the story? And if we're going to measure that, are we just going to count the words? Are we going to count the synonyms that are related to the term? We have to identify the synonyms if we're going to count them. So it's a very structured and rigorous process, and all of that relies on the coding book of definitions. And as we said earlier, it's used quite a bit in journalism, social sciences, documenting size, prominence, and instances. So the content analysis design and advantages are that it's very flexible. It's an analysis of human communication, whether it's written or verbal. And the verbal has been more traditionally qualitative. I'm going to let Liz talk about that more shortly. Um, and but it can be used in many different types of studies. It's not just content analysis. It could be used in a case study. It can be used in other types of research, or as an addendum. But I always like to look at content analysis as benchmarking. We might say there's a lot of graphic images on the internet, but until we decide what we want to measure and what we want to look at and what we consider graphic, um, you know, we don't know. We don't know. We're just assuming, but we don't know. And that's what's good about content analysis. Content analysis, after it's conducted, gives us a benchmark of what we do know. So that's another way to look at it. But we're also going to talk tonight about prominence, the contents, the figures and ground, and manifest, and what we call latent information, because you have to put it all into context. And I'm going to let Liz take over here and share with a recent example. Liz, myself, and Ryan presented at the Qualitative Report Conference in January, and we talked about prominence and how it can be used qualitatively. And I want to let Liz jump in here and share some thoughts about that.
Okay, I'm hoping everybody can still hear me. So Eric was saying that uh, content analysis is very flexible. We can draw enormous amounts of data, but at the same time, you have to establish credibility within a qualitative study, and you have to establish reliability within a quantitative study. So I'm going to be talking particularly about qualitative. One of the points of interest in establishing credibility within a qualitative study is the selection of sample. So we use purposive samples within qualitative research primarily, and for the decision as to which sample will be useful for us, I always use Twining, 2017. He wrote a wonderful article on establishing credibility within a qualitative sample. So the very first consideration, if you're talking about human subjects, is close perspective on the phenomenon of interest. So the sample in a qualitative content analysis study is rarely actual humans, but it is human.
Breaking up a little bit on my end. Hopefully everyone else can hear you.
Okay, I see that this is so frustrating with the breaking it up. I hear you, and I see Armando is breaking up.
Yeah.
Okay, so transferring that idea by Twining that you want data that is gathered from sources who are close to the phenomena of interest is where we began to think about prominence. So, and the experience that started the discussion is I presented at KWB in, I think it was 2018, and I was talking about a study of sources that we found on the internet, a virtual reality and multimedia educational sources from the internet. And Eric asked me, how did you select the examples? I said, we looked for what each organization, we looked for organizations that were well known, and we looked for organizations that had identified specific applications as their best work. And he said, oh, prominence. And I was like, oh my gosh, absolutely. So he had a definition of prominence that worked very well for us. And his definition was placement on the page. So front page, upper, above the fold. This is the classic example of prominence in newspapers. And it's been adapted for the digital world as home page, higher placement on the home page. We used that, and we also used other indicators of prominence, including awards, recognition of any kind. That was our sample. Our sample was the best work of these organizations as indicated by prominent placement on their homepage and by recognition from credible organizations outside of this one, outside of the one that we were studying. We developed a sample of 50 applications, each of which met that criteria. So we used critical case sampling in that study also. So we looked for instances that showed the power of virtual reality, showed the power of multimedia experiences, were prominent, had been identified as best practice or best examples by credible organizations. So that was the beginning of our work on prominence. When Eric and Ryan and I all were at TQR in Florida, we continued talking about prominence. And Eric and I had come to this insight that, given our fields of study, was somewhat obvious. Prominence is closely related to context or figure ground. So the connection between a figure and the context or the ground all around it is recognized both in study of visual art and Gestalt psychology. And the idea is that the context influences the way we perceive the figure far more than we realize. That where that figure appears, the context behind the figure influences how prominent it is. So let me stop there and see if people want to ask questions or make comments. You can raise your hand. You can send an IM message. Let me stop and breathe for a minute and give you a chance maybe to sit and talk with somebody else. We'll give you a minute to react and think about this.
Yep.
We are doing our best to make this interactive, and we're kind of pushing the limits of the software, but there is no reason not to try all kinds of things.
Yeah, and when it comes to prominence, like Liz had said, when you're looking at information that's already out there, that we could want to measure, we typically think of, we could divide up a screen in quadrants. The upper left-hand quadrant is more prominent than the upper right because we read from left to right here in the Western world. But if you were measuring that same level of prominence in the Middle East, where people read from right to left, you need to make sure that you understand the context of what it is that you want to measure. So, but in 1964, when Bud began this, he began just looking at newspapers because that's where everybody got their news from. And of course, newspapers, they want to sell more newspapers, so they're going to put the story that's the big story on the front page and above the fold and below the fold. Now, fast forward, 60 years later, when we look at websites, information that's on the homepage of the website is more prominent than information found deeper inside the website. Information, in the upper left-hand quadrant of the website is more prominent than the upper right-hand quadrant of that website because we read from left to right. And then you have the resolution and all of those things. And if you're measuring on the internet, you've got to take resolution into consideration as well, because not everybody's using the same kind of monitor or the same kind of screen. So there's a lot of some technicalities behind the scenes on the quantitative end that you need to make sure that you're looking at. So all of those things are things that we thought about. But then when we went to TQR in January, one of the reasons why we got accepted is because we thought, do we dare or can we even for a moment apply something that would be quantitative to a qualitative analysis? Because if you're measuring the feelings and thoughts of people, what they say first technically is more prominent than what they say later. But like Liz said, maybe they don't want to say what they really mean first. And so you've got to look at if something is latent or if, manifests, And so looking at it from that perspective and from that lens, it presents to qualitative researchers a whole new concept, because for them not to acknowledge prominence, they may be overlooking the feelings and thoughts of the people that they're trying to measure. So, and that's where research today is taking on all sorts of new meanings, because we like to say that the disciplines live in their own bubble. Journalists, researchers live in their bubble. Art, therapy, mental health might live in their bubble. It just depends on the subject matter expertise, the social scientists, the psychologists. And there's nobody that seems to be looking at the rigor across all of the disciplines and to see if there's any overlap, and what works. So, something to think about as you're discussing this.
Yeah,
We have a
I
question from Dr. Let me see if I can publish it so everybody can see it. There you go.
yes.
There you go. What techniques are used to differentiate between manifested themes and latent themes? By the way, I was able to enable the podium. It's right there. If you feel brave enough, you can go ahead and jump in and get into the spotlight and ask the question, or you can just keep sending the questions like Laura Ann did or Dr. Mansura, and I'm going to publish it for everybody to see it.
Yeah, that's a great question,
Excellent.
Laura. That's a great question. I was about to say that one of the limitations of content analysis is you cannot attribute motive. You cannot understand inner feelings. All you can do is look at the messages or the communications that are being sent out. And it's easy to identify prominent themes within speeches, talking points, political talking points. I always think are an excellent example of manifest prominent themes, because people have a point that they want to get across. They often repeat it over and over and over again. And just from that, can you understand their motive? No, but you can understand that there is a value placed on this theme or idea that we're hearing. And again, I think of politicians because we're going through so much now on the political landscape, and everyone has a message, and the message has been carefully crafted. It's easy to identify that message because it's manifest. But latent messages can also be very important. And I think it's much more challenging to identify a message that is latent or implied or understated, but very, very important and very powerful also as a way of communicating. So a message from a politician that has a latent meaning attached to it is one where they present a number of pieces of information and leave the conclusion easily obtained, but not overtly stated. I don't know if that makes sense. And I'd be interested in your thoughts, Laura Ann. What insights do you have on this same question of manifest versus latent? To summarize, what I'm trying to say is identifying latent messages is difficult, and it requires building an entire framework of logic around the overt or the manifest communications. So can you comment further, Laura Ann?
You can get into the podium, Laura, if you want to. It's
We've got a
enabled.
place here. Jump up. This is exactly what we were hoping to have, a conversation. Oh, there she is. Good.
She's still connecting.
Yeah, we have to just be patient.
Yeah, a little bit of bandwidth issues we had today. I don't know. I thought it was on my end, but apparently it's everywhere. Laura?
Laura Ann's still trying to connect.
Mm-hmm. No microphone.
You have to unmute yourself, Laura Ann, if you can.
Stand by, everybody.
Okay.
May I suggest, Laura, if you can, okay, it looks like, oh, Laura, if you can go into settings, you can try the microphone and test it, and then come back if you want. You
And
can do that.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Armando.
That's fine. That's fine. Go ahead.
I can mention one more thing. I'm always so worried about talking about politics, but as I said, we're at a pivotal moment here in our country. So, what I think is fascinating is this interaction between figure ground. And I think a lot of what we see in the planned talking points contrasts is set up within a certain context or framework. I think that could be fascinating analysis, very fascinating analysis. Did she give up, Armando?
No, but I think what she can do is once she's back away from the podium, just to try her settings to make sure that the microphone right is sounding the way it should, and then she can come back anytime. No issues. The podium is right there.
Okay.
Anytime she wants, anybody can just jump in.
Okay. So we have a place where people can come up and talk to us. And as I said, we're hoping for a conversation.
Yeah.
But she's
But
back.
while we're waiting, I've got the quantitative slide example, of some recent studies, the things that I've worked on, things that Liz and Ryan and myself have worked on. The first example quantitatively that I wanted to share was my fellowship at the Center for Leadership Studies, which was basically an Academy customer experience benchmark observation, where I did a content analysis of the website on the hub in 2015 in terms of what we offered, and that was published in the Internet Learning Journal, and I think I've got that actually up on another screen here. Let's see. So this is the actual study. And so what I was trying to do here is I wanted to measure, do a content analysis of, what were some of the offerings that we were doing back in 2015, throughout our centers. And how do we measure that, what we're offering? We're offering scholarships, we're offering assistance to get people involved in research. And there are software tools that will actually go out and measure a website. Here, this is the actual published article here. I'm going to go try to give it, let's see if I can find a full screen. Let's see. Here we go. That's a little bigger for you to see. So what I was trying to measure is our customer experience. Were we providing enough instances that people could recognize that we could offer the kinds of scholarship and assistance that they were looking for? And so when it came to the actual content analysis, and I'm going to try to turn the page here to the published study. Whoops, I guess that's a bandwidth issue. There we go. I was looking to measure the amount of words, and so I guess what I want to say is that don't always let the software do all the work for you, because the software, you can't program, let's say all the synonyms that you're looking for certain words. And so it's very important that you end up doing a lot of things manually or by hand. And maybe Liz might want to say some things about that, in terms of using software versus doing things manually.
Yeah, actually, I've heard from people I respect that one of the people who publish and I read their work, that one of the limitations of in vivo is it primarily works with frequency. And if you're trying to establish themes, frequency is not always the indicator of the most powerful themes, even though it can be an attribute and an important attribute. You really begin to understand themes when you can go in and look at groups of words together and see the relationship between the groups of words. I think Jim Lane is trying to join us here too. I actually thought of a latent message too that was non-political and pretty powerful. So I'll just add it as long as you can hear me. Um, uh, 20 years ago, Pepsi Cola developed an ad where young people were singing, "I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony." So there was a latent message there. Um, and I understand what it was from the people who developed that advertisement. It was a feel good advertisement. Young people were smiling and singing in harmony, and the latent message was effervescence. Effervescence, that Pepsi Cola is an effervescent drink and brings happiness and maybe something else too. So diabetes. But
Looks like we have Jim on the line.
we got Jim. Hi, Jim.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so as you know, I have short-term memory problems, and so I don't remember if we talked about this before. But I like Johnny Saldana's work a lot, and we kind of hung out with him a little bit in Fort Lauderdale. But he talks about manifest and latent, and Liz, just exactly to your point. He's talking about discourse analysis. He's talking about content analysis and discourse analysis.
Yeah.
And he says exactly what we said. Content analysis targets the manifest by counting in order to get to the latent, but discourse analysis targets the latent from the very start by examining not how many, but rather what kinds of words or images are used to convey something, right? So anyway, looking at hypermasculine, visual action, vocabulary, what kinds of words? So not just counting, but the other nuances. So I don't know if that contributes to the conversation.
Well, and Jim,
Go ahead.
what you're talking about too is you're talking about defining the words, but even the dictionary definition of a word may not be the definition that the people who use the word think of that word. So
Right. What's the
that's
connotation the word carries with it, right? Depending on
yeah,
the culture, the subculture.
the
And we,
culture and their values, right? The values.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So we could think of a lot of examples, which we won't share here, but we could where words are acceptable in some contexts or and not in others. So yeah,
Just or even foul language. Some
yeah,
person's definition of shocking language might differ from others. And I'm going to use this as a shameless plug, by the way, right now. On March 15th, check out the New Phoenix Scholar with my interview with Johnny Saldana and Rodney Luster. We've got quite a good interview, an in-depth interview of his background in qualitative research and how he views both sides, the differences between quantitative and qualitative. His spin on it, I think you're really going to enjoy. That's my shameless plug.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. And thank you so much, Jim. That was a great comment.
Bye.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Have you got any
Yeah.
more? I mean, don't leave if we got you up here. That's a victory.
Anybody else?
Yeah, we have room on the podium. We can take other people.
I just want to make a comment. Can you hear me, Elizabeth?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Every time I see so much expertise at Phoenix and see you guys and see the potential and how much knowledge it is, I always think about our students and
Yes.
how we can is always my worry. How can we translate or inject or make sure that that enormous amount of knowledge is actually infused in our students? So we got 20 Jean lanes, 50 Elizabeth, and 50 more Erics, and so on and so forth. So, and that is, I think, the direction we are taking for this coming year. Make it more learner approachable, so they can come to this wonderful presentation that now we have more technology, and we can actually guide these guys and share our knowledge with them and guide them properly, and we can actually marry the new CDS college with our research hub. I'm not saying anything in particular, but I think you
Eric, I've lost Armando. Have you?
Lost Armando too. Yeah, I
Oh,
lost him too.
all
But
right.
I've got your reports up on the screen, Liz. If you want to take this
I,
opportunity, and I
I can, but I see we got Liz Young up here, so let's hear from
yep,
Elizabeth if she can speak. Can you speak,
you bet.
Liz?
I think I can.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, the whole notion of searching for latent type of of themes or cues or whatever we might call them, ideas, concepts. It reminded me of my Navy SEAL who received the Dissertation of the Year award, and what he did is he did his study on mindfulness, and he did copious examination of his HROs, and most of whom were Navy SEALs or war generals or people of that leadership stature. And one of the things that he found was when he did all his analyses and found all his themes that kind of jumped out at him, so to speak. And what he did at that point is he decided that he was going to just take a break. And he took a vacation with he lives in Atlanta, so he took a vacation down to Florida Keys and went on a fishing trip with his son. And during that time, he totally disengaged himself from his study and from his analysis. And he calls that, according to I think I see you have it up here, the heuristic phase called incubation, where he was actually, he kind of left everything alone, like chickens in a little, in a little, one of those little infirmary places they put chickens to incubate. And so, like, he just left his analysis alone and didn't even think about it. And then when he came back, he became re-engaged in the whole concept again, and he found all kinds of new things that he hadn't really explicitly seen before because they were more implicit, or I guess as we're calling it, latent. So I thought
Yeah.
it just reminded me of that situation. I just thought I would bring that up.
Oh, yeah.
You know
No.
what? That's a
Go
good
ahead,
point. That
Eric.
implicit and explicit are often used in content analysis. It's usually, explicit, and then implicit is usually a subcategory, because you're able to extract a lot of that information along the way. So most researchers prefer to try to get both, while they're looking if they can. Obviously, the implicit stuff may not always be readily available, but that's definitely a category that's often used, both of those at the same time.
Yeah. Well, what he found when he came back is many different ideas that he that I guess, like we're calling it implicitly, were stated but yet not actually explicitly stated. And so he received so many more ideas than and one of the main ideas that he got was that when he interviewed the HROs, the high risk high organization risk people. Making all these shoot, don't shoot, and looking at the cues in their environment and all that. And he was particularly talking about Navy SEALs and war generals. And so one of the things that he found after rereading everything was that they all inadvertently went back to describing their very first situation where they had, actually at that point of time, developed a kind of a PTSD, if you will, thought process toward the job that they had. Because there are not too many HROs that don't have PTSD from what they see and do. But he didn't pick that up at first. He was just reading their details of their stories. And then when he went back, that was one of the many things that he found was that, oh yeah, these, even though 20 years later, they're still in their mind talking about that first experience that happened way back, So I thought that was kind of interesting that he made that discovery.
Yeah.
That's it.
I think it's very interesting. Is there an
thank
echo?
you for sharing.
Go ahead, Eric.
No, I was going to say thank you very much for sharing that because, that's just another example of the applications that that you can extract from a content analysis, but it's how you set it all up to begin with. And I know people say, well, that's like any study, but I always think of content analysis as more labor intensive on the front end before you even start the study, even piloting it too. And I always use the example of, let's say you just want to count the number of paragraphs devoted to a particular topic in a textbook. You've got to do some intercoder reliability and sit down and you have to define what a paragraph is, and you have to take two people, and you have to have person A count the number of paragraphs, person B, and ideally they should be counting the same amount of paragraphs, but that's not always the case. So we allow for a little, plus and minus differentiations too. But I was going to say, Liz, that I do have that slide up for your qualitative studies if you want to talk about those as well.
I can talk a little bit about the first one because it's so similar to what Liz is saying and what Jim was saying. And that first study, I don't know if you're going to click on the DOI. That was family member experiences providing individualized music to individuals with dementia. This was published in early 2017, I think. And since then, this understanding of music for people with dementia has just exploded across the country. And we now know from multiple studies that listening to familiar music helps people with dementia restore their memories. They're able to remember the songs or the music. Sometimes they're able to speak after months of not speaking. They recognize their family. Oh gosh, it was really an amazing a discovery of something that could be very supportive, not only for the people with dementia, but for the family members, and that's who we were interested in, the family members.
Liz, I remember Glenn Campbell that during that time period, because he passed away from dementia, and they said that his music helped with his memory.
Really, and who was that? I didn't catch the name. It was
that was Glenn Campbell. Glenn Campbell.
Yeah. Well, his story and many others help people to understand this. So we had 35 interviews with family members. That was a public site. We got permission. We analyzed the interviews extensively, as Liz is saying. We went over and over and over and over, and then we actually took a little break and moved away from it. And there was one quotation that we did not know how to categorize it, and it was a daughter. Her mother had a severe dementia, and she talked about how much the music was helping her mother, and how her mother had encouraged her as a child to be willing to speak up, to use her voice to represent herself. So she didn't connect those two things. So it took us this is the first content analysis study I did with this team of people who are people from our center. Um, and they've retired. Barbara Foyle and Patricia Shopland and Zeno Rasmussen is at another university, but the two women have since retired. But what we finally understood, that woman did not speak specifically of helping her mother to find her voice. This was a turnabout, a giving back. The daughter whose mother helped her to speak, learn to speak up in difficult circumstances, was now helping her mother to regain her voice through this music. We didn't do as much with that insight as we might have, but that was my first experience with working with latent meaning. And also with what Liz Young was talking about. Take it, you go through it, you go through it, you go through it, and then you step away for a little bit and come back later. So that's the story. But we would not have understood that meaning without also understanding the context in which it was expressed. The context was a daughter taking care of her mother. Her mother is in severe stress from dementia, is unable to speak, and is able to briefly reconnect, find her voice again, to speak to her family with this help of music, familiar music. And by the way, it's only the familiar music that works. If you play popular music that has no meaning for the listener, it's like elevator music. No one reacts. So we should all be making playlists. That's one of the messages from this. Everyone should be finding their favorite familiar music and making a list of it for later on. So
Or just ask Alexa to play it, right?
yes, yeah.
Huh.
So that's a story about context, manifest meaning, and there was a lot of manifest meaning, and it was relatively easy for us to find it, and then latent meaning, and that was difficult for us to find, and we lacked the vocabulary really to speak about it. And as I said, content analysis, you really cannot attribute motive or internal feelings, but you can track the content of those conversations. So you
I know
can
we've got
look,
5 minutes
Eric.
left. Go ahead, Liz. Yeah, so I've got on that next slide for some of your other examples.
I can barely read it. This is Johnston, Olivia Steele, Smith, and Bailey. And I think some of these people are here today. I know Patty's team was coming, and I hope we're going to hear from them. I see Mimi. So I hope we'll hear from them. So this was the first study. This is the study you talked to me about, Eric, at the conference, where you said you must have looked at hundreds of samples. How did you pick your samples? And that was the conversation that we had that led to our continuing discussion and work on prominence. And in that one, what we were doing is looking for evidence of pedagogical foundations in virtual reality applications. And we got some direction here from Dr. Cabrici. She had done a study where she looked for unstated pedagogical foundations in games. So we use games, potentially we'll use virtual reality applications for educational purposes. It's much easier if you understand the pedagogical assumptions that lie beneath the construction of those games and VR applications. And we were pretty successful with that. And
We
this
got
one is Patty
we got
Steele
five
was
minutes. Sorry, we got
good.
5 minutes before the top of the hour. So
Oh,
just to let you know, the recording is going to automatically stop at that time. Nothing I can do. It's 5 minutes
okay.
before, okay?
Okay. We'll show a picture and then ask for any comments. So, and this one was, we were looking for evidence of the potential to learn the kind of skills that are taught in a visual environment. And in order to do that, we used the studio thinking framework, which was developed at Harvard out of Project Zero, where they went into studio art classes for 2 years and looked at the skills that are being taught. So the overt curriculum is to make art. The covert curriculum is to build these cognitive skills that are associated with visual thinking, visual work. The first one is observe, the next one is engage, then envision. And if you think about it, memory, uh, memory, imagination, dreams, these are all very visual experiences. So, imagination is the root of thinking about something, a thought experiment. What else can you do? We can't all be artists, but we may all learn some cognitive skills that are related to visual thinking that might be quite useful. So, that was the point of that study. So we want to give our people a chance to speak again. Thank you for the people. Thank you to the people who came up and spoke at the podium. We'd like to give anyone else a chance to speak.
We got about 3 minutes left, so don't be shy. If you've got a burning question about content analysis, we hope that Liz and myself might be able to answer it.
And if not, somebody else here will be able to jump up and give us some help. Oh, somebody may be coming, or it might be Armando. Okay, I would encourage you to take the opportunity. We've got just a couple minutes left. Practice your. Oh, here's Margaret.
Hello. I just would like to ask a question about using awards as a measure of prominence. Many
Yes.
times awards, even if they are awarded by a reputable organization, are usually self-nominated. And so, are you taking that into consideration, how the award is really awarded?
I think we go with the credibility of the awarding body, Margaret. I mean, even the Nobel Peace Prize, is nominated by people who have some kind of an interest in it. If that was the only measure we were using, we might worry more about it. But we were using the double measure of prominence in placement. Where is it? And remember, what we were looking for was, what does this organization regard as their very best work? And how do we know they regard it that way? First, they put it out as a prominent placement. Second, they have received some kind of recognition for it. So that seemed pretty legitimate to us. And remember, it was accepted by 2 different publishers. So that's usually the gold standard. If an editor thinks you're making good sense, you're doing it. You're making good sense. But if I were to do it again, I would add a little, maybe a sentence or two about the credibility of the organization. Like one of those, I know that sample very well because I helped to construct it. So one of the samples was, I always get these 2 mixed up. David Attenborough's brother Richard, or Richard Attenborough's brother David, is down in Australia making incredibly beautiful virtual reality applications. The ones that we chose, they have many. We took one that was prominently displayed on their homepage, just as Eric is talking about, and that had received a number of awards. And we were confident that represented, what they regarded as their best work. But what we might have added was more descriptive detail about the organization. So this is a very credible organization, and we just took it as a given that people would see that and understand. That it's a very credible organization. National Geographic is a very credible organization.